Mikey's Lab. He says, on the show, you were challenged to build some incredible things. Can you take us through your process from idea to planning to building when faced with large, multidisciplined projects? That is a very involved question, but I'm going to give it a shot. I will use as an example our Road Warrior episode where Laura Kampf, Simone Yatch, and I engaged in a duel of engineering and driving destruction prowess. This was a stunning episode. There is an incredible semi-con, I guess, that occurs in the California desert every year called Wasteland Weekend. And the wonderful denizens of the wasteland dress up in universe from the Mad Max films and enjoy hanging out and driving crazy vehicles in the desert every year. And they worked with us on that episode. So how that episode began as a very, very different episode. In the beginning, I was interested in building a cycle cart. Cycle carts, CYCLEKART, is a hobby wherein a car chassis has been agreed upon that costs, I think, about $1,000. So it's like if I remember correctly, it's like a 5-horsepower motor, a standard steering arrangement, standard size wheels, axles, drivetrain, etc. And everyone's agreed upon those parameters. And then cycle cart enthusiasts build their own cars on top of those chassis and they race them. And it's surpassingly dangerous. They make it clear on the cycle cart fan sites that you're going to roll over. You better be ready. You got to wear a helmet. This is a hobby that's going to lead to some Band-Aids. So that was their initial idea. I wanted to build a cycle cart with somebody. I wanted to have a cycle cart challenge with somebody that an engineer that I admired. And we talked to Tom Sachs, we talked to Danny Hillis and other folks. And then Discovery, the network didn't love. They had done cycle carts on something else, or cycle carts had shown up on another Discovery show and hadn't done that well. This is the kind of arguments you end up having with a network. This is the kind of thing. They're like, well, we did that once and no one liked it. And you're like, these things aren't the same. I'm going to do something different. Nah, don't do it. And you pick your battles. Sometimes you draw lines in the sand in order to pick different battles. And in this case, we let that battle go. And we were talking about it in the room, Jax and Y and Steve-O. Not Steve-O, John Tessier. My longtime producer on Mythbusters, Steve Christensen, was very close mates with John Tessier. In fact, when I was considering John as a showrunner, and I hadn't worked with him before, it was Steve-O that called me up and said, mate, he's like a brother. And I was like, well, that's good enough for me. So it wasn't Steve-O, John Tessier. We were in the room trying to figure out an engineering challenge that involved vehicles that would be really fun. And I think it was my son, Thing 2, that actually busted out with the idea of a Road Warrior kind of challenge. And we were off to the races. Network loved that idea right away. Laura and Simone were both into it right out of the gate. And then that was a really easy one to get across the line. We sent Discovery footage of both Simone and Laura. They were familiar with Simone. And I think some of them were familiar with Laura. They loved them both and approved them both. So now we had those guys on board. It was time to discuss the parameters of the challenge. How do we make a target system that we can build that's consistent? And so it's funny with a contest like that, the narrative begins and ends with the rules. But in point of fact, the rules are actually kind of almost the last thing you come up with in the episode, because you've got to sculpt the rules in order to achieve a narrative. I mean, what you should know about a show like Junkyard Wars is that as those two teams were building, the producers are constantly changing the rules. It's like high school science fair disease. They're constantly altering the rules to achieve some parity between the two teams, because very frequently in a contest like that, you're going to have one team that just eats the other team's lunch. And that's not great television to just watch someone get trounced every time. You want there to be more tension. And as a producer, look, I realize that some of this may sound to you very cynical about reality television, but it's totally true. And we would have dealt with it on the food fight episode with Tori as well, talking about how to sculpt the rules to achieve the most amount of fighting and the most amount of excitement while still finishing with an episode that we can film in a reasonable period of time and cut into something useful. So Laura and Simone and I and the production team had several long meetings talking about ways to execute this contest that we all felt comfortable with. And even so, then once we have a set of parameters, this I think was the second big build we did for Savage Builds. So we took over this large warehouse down in Hunters Point, and we got the cars. There's a whole sequence of picking out the cars, and then we got robbed. Right, that was right around the time we got all our tools stolen. It happens. So that changed some of the rules because we lost some key pieces of equipment. So there were small alterations made in the final execution plan because of that robbery and because of how much time it took from production at that moment. I fully recognize I'm not giving a super detailed answer to your question, but that's also because this process changes with every single story brings with it its own narrative parameters, its own decision processes. And it's a moving target. That's maybe the best way to describe it. It's, you think that narrative television, like dramatic television, someone writes a script, someone else storyboards that script, and someone else shoots the storyboards to make the script. It's totally not like that. I mean, yeah, in theory, it's like that, but really it's more like someone writes a script, someone changes the script, someone storyboards, it alters the network, everyone has notes, this changes, that changes, then you start to shoot, that's not possible, this location's gone, this actor is gone, we got to change. I mean, all of these parameters are changing constantly, and you've got to be able to adjust to them. So if there's anything that typified the kind of production, reality television production that I'm used to, it's that everything changes all the time, and you've got to prioritize what's possible at every given moment. And that actually, to me, is the most fun part. Like, if you ask me what my key memory of Mythbusters is, and I know you didn't, but like my key memory of Mythbusters is standing on a location holding a cup of Starbucks coffee that came in one of those cardboard boxes, standing with Steve-O and Scott Sorensen, my A cameraman, and like looking at a landscape and going, what if we came from over there and then we did this thing? Oh yeah, but then we got to do this thing over here. Yeah. All right, I'm going to pull the truck around and get that. And Scott, you want to get that? So like that process of figuring it out on the fly from what we're looking at in front of us, there's nothing more fun. Okay, one more question. Do we have any that have arrived via text from here we go. Yes, I want to answer some of the questions that came up during this actual live stream, and we have a couple. I'm going to answer two more questions here. Rob Johnston wants to know, how awesome was it for you to have your son working on Savage Builds with you? Did anyone refer to him as thing number? I don't think anyone on the crew referred to my son by my appellation. No, it was fabulous to have him on the set. It was really lovely. He is an experienced rock climber, so he was my safety when I was learning to fly in the Iron Man suit rig. Oh my God, that was amazing. And actually, so we're on set. I'm learning how to fly, and I'm just really getting it when my engine cuts out, and then I fall like 12 feet. But I didn't fall and hit the deck. Then my son caught me, as was our practice, right? That was what he was there to do. He caught me before I hit the deck, and then he lowered me down, and I said, "Thanks, handsome." That's kind of how I speak to my kids. And my son was working with another production assistant, and the other production assistant looked at my son and said, "How come the boss just called you handsome?" Which is a very reasonable question. He said, "Actually, it's my dad." Yeah, an absolute delight. Absolutely, to work with your adult kids is a genuine treat. There is before you are a parent, before you have a kid, you fantasize about all sorts of aspects of what parenthood is going to be like, with equal amounts of terror and excitement. But for me, one of the things I was most looking forward to when my kids were in utero was that moment of like standing on a street corner with them where they're like at my side and their like little hand is wrapped around my index finger. Just that little moment of being in the world with your kid. That their little hand holding my finger, that was something I thought about. Like, I can't wait for that. And it happens pretty quickly, you know? And when it happened, when I was standing on the corner with my kids and their little hands holding on to my hands, it was like every bit as awesome as I was hoping it would be. The adult version of that is going to another city and taking your kid out to dinner, taking your adult kid out to dinner in the city that they live in. I've had the opportunity to do it with both of my kids a bunch of times. And there's an aspect to it that feels exactly as proud parenty and exciting to like see this being you are helping to make a stand in the world move their own way through it. It's really exciting. Okay, well, last question. Here we go. Let's see. One. Maker Padwan. Maker Padwan. There you go. Maker Padwan WKP wants to know. They said, I love Savage Builds. And we got to see you build a stand for your Iron Man Mark II suit. But you never mentioned, did you get to keep the rocket gloves? Did I get to keep the gravity rig from Richard Browning? No, I did not. I still have an open invitation from Richard and his team to continue to fly in the gravity rig. And when this is all over, I am definitely going to take another opportunity to play with that rig, because frankly, that moment of bringing the two rocket engines on your arms down to the ground and feeling that lift you off the ground, seriously, when you actually get it right, it feels like every dream you've ever had about flying. Seriously. And nobody's asked for this, but I want to talk about that guy who's flying around LAX in a rocket pack. If you haven't seen this, check it out. Airplanes in the landing pattern at LAX have several times in the past few months been reporting seeing what looks like a human operating a jetpack at like 4,000 feet of elevation around the LAX airspace. I don't think that's a person. I don't think that's anybody in a jetpack. I think it's a drone that someone made look like a guy in a jetpack just to mess with airplanes. Mark my words. I think it's somebody pranking everybody. Yeah, there you go. That's the kind of question I used to answer on Mythbusters all the time. Well, thank you guys so much for joining me for this live stream and the quickie little build for the box for my hammer gauge. This is one of the things we're going to be doing in 2021. So I will see you in a couple of weeks for another live stream. And until then, stay safe, wear your masks, and I'll see you guys next time. Thank you guys so much for watching that entire video. If you would like to support Tested even further, well, I'm here to tell you that you could become a member. If you follow the links below, you will see there are several tiers of membership depending on how much you'd like to pay and how much access you would like to me and the Tested team. And membership comes, as always, with some excellent benefits, including questions that I'll answer in live streams. The questions have been so amazing, and exclusive videos and exclusive content. Follow the links below, and we will see you next time.